Awesome. We're live. All right. So, welcome to the Memberverse podcast, where we interview people who are making an impact on the growth of the fitness industry. I'm your host, Dave Pancham, and also the CEO of Go Pancham, your fitness marketing agency dedicated to freeing up your time and increasing your bottom line. Today's guest is Katie Santos, and she's an expert in the number one area everybody loves in fitness, which is people. So, she is a human resources expert with a deep passion for helping fitness businesses thrive through effective people management strategies. Katie's the founder of Fitness HR and brings a wealth of knowledge when it comes to hiring, onboarding, retaining the right talent for studios and gyms. So she has tons of experience and has become kind of a go-to expert when it comes to this area to streamline your HR processes. So, Katie, thank you for joining today. To kick things off, can you give us the sauce? Can you give us a little breakdown of your history, your background, and how you came to doing what you are doing today?
Hey everybody out there in Facebook land and podcast land. Good to see you. Thanks, Dave, for this. I started in the fitness industry in the 80s. So teaching aerobics, doing all that sort of stuff. Fast forward through all the iterations. I owned a studio with two other partners for 20 years. We closed in 2020, but we were one of the first places to change our staff from independent contractors to employees, just because we wanted a business that had value. We wanted to know that the people that were working for us were doing the things we wanted them to do. So when California changed over its laws, I'd been doing some studio consulting already, and people started to phone in and say, "Hey, we know you have employees. How did you do it? This seems really daunting." So I got my HR certification. I learned a lot about leadership, conflict resolution, all the things, aside from all the legal ramifications of having employees. So that's pretty much where I sit today. It's morphed a little bit. I'm doing a lot of leadership coaching with the people that I've already brought through the employee conversion process. So I love my work. It's really dynamic and seems to be changing all the time.
So what level of gym or studio owner are you usually finding that you're most commonly working with? Is it sometimes is it a lot of I'm brand new opening a studio, or is it more established studios? What are we seeing here?
It's a little bit of both. It's surprising sometimes I still get calls from people that say, "I'm going to open my studio in a month and I have no idea how to do all this yet," which scares me a little. So that's my drop everything and let me help you time. But I work all the way up to multi-location studios. There's so much going on with HR and legal compliance, and it changes all the time, especially in California, but in other states. So I'm a go-to resource at the start, but all the way through the life cycle of the businesses that I work with.
So I think the whole people side of things has changed quite a bit in the past few years. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Younger people are coming into this, thankfully, and those people are coming in equipped with an understanding of what their rights are and what the rules are that an employer needs to follow, what the employer can and can't do to them and for them. So with that in mind, as they are coming into the workforce, it's really important for studios to know exactly what the rules are and be clear on what they expect from their employees. The second thing is that they're looking for career growth. I would like to think that in our industry, this is something you stay in for a career. For some, it's part-time and just, a job to have because it's fun. But for others, they want to expand this as a career. And you can go so many different places. I mean, witness where you and I are right now, right? I started out as a trainer in Gold's Gym, and here I am, So they're looking for that career growth. And if we as employers can establish that, make it clear through our culture, through our employee branding, that we welcome people that are looking for that, you're going to have a more engaged staff that you can retain for longer. And I know Harvard Business Review said 62% of people look for career growth when they're looking for a role to step into.
So starting at the beginning, right? I'm sure there's tons of mistakes that gym owners make when it comes to finding the right talent. What are these common mistakes, and how do they avoid them in terms of finding the right fit for your gym or studio?
So there's a lot that goes behind it, but the two things that I see that are most prevalent are hiring out of desperation, just
Mm.
because you need a body. Maybe somebody quit, or maybe suddenly you're busy, or you need some time off because your kid is sick, or and hiring a star teacher. I mean, I think a lot of us have made this mistake thinking this teacher is going to bring in new clients and going to really work with retaining the clients that you have and that they will solve all your revenue problems. Oftentimes, those teachers can't fulfill what you have in your mind, and they may come with such excess baggage that it just doesn't fit in with your culture, right? The last thing is not having the role that you're hiring for really well articulated and having a good understanding between you and the person that you're bringing in, and a good onboarding process, dropping people into a role and then going back to your busy life as an owner and not nurturing through the onboarding and training section of the job.
So what should someone be doing in that, in your opinion? What should they be doing instead of that? Like hiring out of desperation. It's like, but I'm desperate. Like I need somebody, right? Or I've heard that one, the other one quite a few times in terms of like hiring somebody, we work with a lot of franchises and stuff like that. And they're like, they own one franchise, like, oh, this person used to be a studio manager over here. It's like, this is going to be perfect fit for us. And I've heard like 9 times out of 10, like those don't work out.
Yeah, yeah. So it needs to be a culture fit. There's a saying by an entrepreneur called Ram Charan. It says, if leaders don't get culture right now, they won't survive, period. The war for talent, or survive as a business. So it's really about starting at the very foundation and finding out who you are as a business and being able to articulate that. We learned to do that, part way into our tenure, maybe 5 or 7 years in. And I started to write out all the things that culturally I thought we were. And I took it to the current staff that we had. And some of the things they agreed with. They're like, yeah, we do this, we do this, we do this. This one, we don't do. You've made it up out of your own head. So it's me and them going back to the drawing board with my partners and saying, okay, let's really think about what is this business saying to the outside world. So that's the important part. From there, once you've got that culture established, I like to create a org chart, or what I call the aspirational accountability chart. And I'm working on trademarking that, so you can write it down. But so it's aspirational because in reality, when we have a business, it's our face in a lot of these roles, right? But it's helpful to articulate what each role's responsibilities and duties are. What are the traits that you're looking for in the person to fill that role that meets your culture standards, so that when the time comes for you to be able to hire that, it's there, it's clear. With that in place, you then start to draft the job description. What are the qualities I need? What are the responsibilities that they have? That forms the basis of your job posting, right? So along with that goes the employee handbook. And a handbook is the thing that tells the employee, these are your rights. These are the things that you should expect from us. It's really kind of a legal document. It protects you a lot. And it gives kind of a high level view of what they can expect at the job. Then the employee manual is the day-to-day, like what are the little operational things that we need to do every day in the studio. So all those documents work together to be able to form this foundation for you to hire from. And those three serve as the place that you go back to when there's performance issues or questions about, in the job description, we had this as a duty that you have, but you're not executing it. Let's have a conversation about why. Maybe you weren't aware of it. Maybe you forgot. Maybe you just don't want to do it, or maybe you're not great at it and let me train you up to it, right? So that whole kind of universe of documentation really helps you in so many ways to find the right people, to make sure that you keep them on track, to make sure that you write a good, compelling job posting. And that, when you need to let someone go, you can point directly to those things that they maybe aren't fulfilling. And that's a reason for you to let them go. Right.
Hmm. So what about the desperation piece? Like, how do I make sure that I'm not hiring out of desperation? I'm assuming part of this has to be about being ahead of the curve or staying on top of things, but I'd love to hear your approach or suggested approach to this kind of thing.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of always be hiring. And the question I get is, well, if I'm always hiring, that means either I'm spending $90 a month on Indeed, or I've got my web page up, which I'm a big fan of. That's my hiring page. And somebody's going to apply that I think is really wonderful. And what am I going to say to them? And this is where you as a leader can start to just be completely straight. You're like, Dave, you've applied with me. I don't have an opening right now, but your resume is really compelling. I would like to keep it on file so that when an opening comes along, I can reach out to you and we can start to have this conversation about you possibly coming on board. So we had a whole web page that was up all the time, and it had all the different roles, and it did say hiring now or submit your resume. So people knew when they came there, like, this is a role that's open, I can submit the resume. When they submitted the resume, they either went through the pipeline of, the interview process, and or they got some communication from us to say, we don't have that role open right now. I was checking in all the time with both of those populations, right? So the person that was sitting in the background waiting for a role to open, I was reaching out maybe every 3 months, just checking in.
Hmm.
I still have your resume. I still don't have anything open yet, but I wanted you to know I'm still thinking of you. You're top of mind.
Hmm.
So that when I could start to see the rumblings of maybe somebody moving away, that was a key person, or maybe I need to let someone go. Hopefully that didn't happen, but I could reach out and they knew who I was. They didn't forget who I was. On the other side of that, when you're bringing someone on board, I like to nurture them just like I nurture through the client journey. So they would get emails about, hey, thanks for submitting your resume. Here's the next step and when you'll hear from us. Then I would have, you're hearing from us. We're going to bring you in for an interview. You're going to meet with Claudia. Park here. Typical dress is this. This is how long we're going to have you. Let me know if you need to cancel, if you've taken another opportunity. And then the flow went on from there all the way through their onboarding, just like we would treat a client. Kind of speaking back to what we talked about of, how the landscape has changed for hiring people now. You've got to treat them with respect and let them be seen.
Yeah, that's that's something that I've been like adjusting to too for certain positions in our company is same thing. It's like always be hiring. It's like even if we don't need the position yet, like you find a good person, keep in touch with them. Like it's nice to have a bench,
Yeah.
that you can call on when you need it. And that's what I've always heard from like the best like studio owners, best studio managers. It's like it's guaranteed turnover is going to happen, especially like in a fitness studio, like with the certain
Mm-hmm.
positions that you have. It's like you have to expect it, especially if it's a college kid or something like that. You have to be prepared for that kind of thing to happen. But when you have top talent, how do you suggest now about trying to retain that top talent?
Yeah. So it starts with the hiring, right? Making sure that you've got somebody that really fits all that criteria that I talked about earlier. But it also takes some leadership skills that sometimes we don't have when we open a fitness studio. We open it because we like movement, we want to train clients, right? And then, oh my gosh, I have to hire people. So those same skills that you use training clients and retaining them, you can use with your employees, right? We like to be inquisitive about our clients and find out what their needs are and what their goals are. We can do the same with staff.
Hmm.
We like to coach our clients and encourage them and help them grow in their movement journey. We can do the same with staff, not in their movement journey, but in their work journey. when they go on vacation or they take a break or something like that, or when they have milestones in their life, we're recognizing these things like we do for clients. So that really helps to retain kind of the soft bits, right? But the more compelling bits is the ongoing career training that we talked about earlier. And it can range everything from not just training and mentoring to make them better teachers, but maybe there's education about financial literacy that they need. I'll tell you a little story. I sat in I was speaking at a retreat, and there were 30 physical therapist business owners there. And out of those 30, when we brought in the financial expert to talk about what's a 401k, what's an IRA, what's a Roth IRA, half of them didn't know what we were talking about. So, you may be 20 years old when I hire you, but 60 is going to arrive at some point. So let me give you some tools to get there with success, right? Perhaps if you check in with that employee, they'd like to learn some administrative skills. Maybe they want to go through a conflict resolution class. Maybe they want to learn how to run the software better, or be an Asana, expert or something like that. Whatever these things are, they need to be crafted specifically for the employee that's in front of you. So you can't necessarily make a blanket statement to say, oh, we're all going to learn how to teach on ISOFIT. Maybe there's staff people that don't want to learn that. Maybe they have some manager aspirations and they want to learn some leadership skills. So when you talk to your people, you review them and you say, where do you want to be in a couple of years? Which seems like kind of a trite question, but really be inquisitive. They know you care. They know that you're watching out for them. And you can, from there, start to derive some ways to really retain them and make them happy.
So how do you coach owners to kind of because you mentioned one of the things you also do is like leadership training, leadership coaching, right? And I think leadership development as an owner is a really important thing, because I think many times in the fitness industry, people start the business out of passion, right? They start a gym because they love fitness and they probably had a great transformational story themselves. And that's why they started this, and they jump into a business and sometimes they don't realize what they're in for. And they're probably running the whole business or a lot of it out of reaction, like just dealing with everything that's being thrown at them, and they don't step into that role of actually being a leader. How do you coach somebody to try to make that transition?
Exactly everything you said. We don't come into this knowing how to manage or how to lead people. So there's a level of self-awareness and that you need to have as an owner. What are my skills? Who am I as a leader? Can I lead? And if you can't, maybe find somebody that can manage for you, right? But I think the better answer is, how can I improve myself? What can I learn? What can I read? It's similar to our workouts, right? We can't go in and power lift 350 on the first day necessarily. So it's going to take us some time and some leveling up to get there, and some practice. What I find is the number one thing that gets in the way of leading effectively is our own fear. Our fear as owners to confront problems that we see, our shyness. So if we reel back to how do we interact with clients, typically we are pretty confident. We know our stuff. We can train really well. We have no problem communicating with them. See if you can put that mindset in place when you approach an employee, whether it's just for a conversation or whether it's for I've got to tackle a big leadership problem in my studio. Things are maybe getting out of control a little bit. Maybe there's conflict between two or more people. Maybe there's conflict between me and someone else. So dig down and find those skills. Something I learned was to do an intake first when you have a conflict. So just like we do intakes with clients, right? We're not going to throw them under a bunch of weight equipment until we know if they had back surgery or knee surgery or whatever. So in that intake, You're looking at the person and you're listening to them and seeing, what can I find is their underlying need, right? How can I see, are they looking for a need to be understood? Are they looking for a need to be seen? Are they looking for a need to be coached through? If I can find that underlying need and tie it to how I would train a client, I think that makes your leadership approach that much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Active listening, we've heard all this before, mirroring back what the staff person has said to you, maybe recognizing what the problem is, understanding that, taking a perspective of how it affects them in their work life, maybe in their personal life. I have this term called be a listening leader. I was horrible at it when I first started managing people. I just thought, oh, I'll just be the boss and command people to do all this stuff. Until I stepped back and really listened to a busboy that said to me, Manning, I was not married at the time,
Mm-hmm.
you're a bitch. And I went, whoa, let me listen to that. And I said, how do you mean? And he said, well, you're running around here telling people what to do and not telling them how to do it or praising them for the things that they've done right. So I listened to him. That was my first opportunity to learn to be a listening leader and kind of shut my mouth and really hear what was being dispensed in the studio, but also told to me, right?
Mm-hmm. So what's people being such a big challenge, I think, have you noticed a shift in the kind of, I feel like one of the biggest challenges I've noticed that gym owners are having with people is like part-time, full-time, right? And I don't have the solution to that, but I know one of the biggest challenges they also have is like you bring a part-time person in, they're not fully committed to what you're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
then that makes it very difficult in your business, especially if that person happens to be the person that might have to try to convert somebody to a member, like that conversation never happens or it's just very weakly handled. And I've also seen the very successful studios, they don't have as many part-time people. They seem like they've figured something out, but you know, how do we solve? What do you
What's the deal? Yeah. Um, Full time in our business is rough, right? We can't, I don't know about you, but I can't train 40 clients a week. So oftentimes that role, if you bring in a full time person, has to be part admin, part training. I personally am a fan of having lots of part timers, but I have this joke about Pilates teachers, and I'm one, so I feel I can say this, is Pilates teachers like to work alternate Tuesdays every other month. Because it's just a fun job, and I want to say I'm a Pilates teacher. Not so true now, and not true for most Pilates teachers, but that was kind of our running joke. So setting standards and sticking to them is important. In our studio, you had to work, even at the youngest trainers had to get themselves up to 10 hours a week in the studio. And that was part of increasing your pay and moving up the ladder as far as the junior trainer, senior trainer, master trainer, for lack of a better word. You had to increase those hours up to a maximum of maybe 30, depending on what you were doing. But we didn't want our people training more than 30 hours a week. And that did a few things. We paid well enough that it gave them a living. It motivated people to work a little bit more. As you talked about, Dave, it got them invested in the business. They had FaceTime there. People recognized them. They understood how to do all the things in our business. Everyone was trained on everything. You better know how to sell at least moderately, maybe not as well as our salespeople. But it also gave us some flexibility because we wanted our teachers to be able to. I had one teacher in particular, she would save up her money, and every 2 years she would go on a month-long vacation. I didn't want to deprive her of that.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to have part-timers that could whose roles could kind of ebb and flow and expand as needed when others were out, really served us. I have a studio that I work with now. He has all full-time people. He has them all on salary, but he's very constrained. If one leaves, he's got a heap of clients he has to cover. Somebody has to. So then he's into overtime, or he's stepping back into a training role. So at the very least, having maybe half of your staff as part-time, I think is worth it. That said, if somebody's really invested in your studio, and they can be a manager and a teacher or trainer at the same time. So they could get into that 40-hour role. You just have to be mindful of, hey, if they go on vacation for a couple weeks, do I have some backup in there?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Fair enough. So I'm definitely a big fan of leveraging coaching or outsourcing things when it makes sense, because we all have our domains of expertise. I'm sure with a lot of people in fitness, their domain of expertise is training, coaching people, and there's things that are just very difficult. And I would imagine with the birth of your own business here that you're filling a need for people when it comes to HR and stuff like that. Can you at least break down a little bit about like how you are able to step in and help out, gym and studio owners, and maybe some success stories around what you've been able to help people accomplish, or some stress you've been able to alleviate for them?
Yeah. So I had a client, she came to me about 8 years ago, and she was running a good size HIIT studio. And she had no documentation. She did have employees. And she was going through staff turnover about 70% a year, which is pretty horrific, I think.
Yeah.
And her revenue numbers were really in the tank, and her clients were kind of apathetic. It took us about a year to really dive in, like I talked about earlier, define the culture. Who is this studio? What do they do? What do they not do? What do they stand for the clients, for the employees? And then we started to create that documentation, after we did that aspirational accountability chart. Because at the moment, she was doing all the things. She was doing the marketing, the social, the training, the front desk. I'm like, we've got to drill down and find out what role right now will help you the most. So it took us really a year to get that documentation in place and the staff trained on it that she had. And we really kind of rehired, which is something I do when someone's converting from independent contractor to employees. It's a good opportunity to really sit down and say, this is what we're doing now. We didn't do it before. I apologize, but we're standing this new business model up. Are you in? And it's also an opportunity to go, yeah, I'll interview that person, but it's really my opportunity to peel them off because they're not going to fit, right? So we rehired, retrained them on the policies, the procedures. To be honest, it took a lot of vulnerability on her part, because she did have to kind of step forward and say, I should have done this earlier. And I apologize for this being a bit of a mishmash and confusing of a place to work. Now you and us, you team and me, are going to ride this train up the hill, hopefully. But now she's got her current staff she's had for over 7 years. I helped her hire them. I interviewed them. And every time she hires, it's because she's deliberate and she's disciplined and she waits if she has to. The new staff that she brings on board really get integrated very seamlessly. The interview questions that she asks are directly related to the job description and the culture, so that she knows who she hired. She doesn't have to fire fast, because they fit in there for a reason. If there's something missing along the way that you would normally have to fire them for, maybe you can coach them through it, right? So those are the success stories I live for, is, making sure that that's done as well as possible. Is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Yeah. She's got a business now that in 3 years she's positioning to sell for way more than she could have a while ago, because she's got such a solid, connected team and the documentation that goes with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. I guess the last few questions here, hitting back on people is always the problem, or people are generally the problem for gym and studio owners, and I think still regularly the problem ever since COVID has been finding good people. How do you suggest owners go about it? How do you go about trying to, like, what is working to find the talent you're looking for? We have tons of clients who can't find a good head trainer, can't find a good ops manager and stuff like that. What is, besides being always hiring and always looking, because some of these owners, it feels like they're still looking and they've been looking for a while.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah. What's working for you, or what's the strategies that you kind of suggest, for someone in these kinds of positions right now?
It's funny. I saw a post today, and it was for a virtual assistant, and it laid out all this aspirational stuff, but it really didn't say to the potential applicant why you would want to come to work for me, So I think it's important for us to think about that culture again, get real about it, and say, what makes my business compelling for someone to come to work for, and really start to articulate that in good marketing speak. If you want to use ChatGPT, it's a good place to start. I've used it myself. It's about going out and telling the employee why they want to come there, just like you would tell the client why they want to come to you. And I would bet that a lot of people that are still looking may not be doing that. So it's a little time for some self-awareness about that. My pet peeve is submit your resume here. We're hiring, submit your resume here. I don't know where you are. I don't know how much you're going to pay me. I don't know why I want to come to work for you. I kind of know what the job is. Maybe it's a name that doesn't surface well in Google. Naming this role well might be boring, but it helps in your search results. And then digging down, I think I talked to you a couple of weeks ago about one of our best hires was from Pete's Coffee. Our front desk person came. I had been watching this person for a year. I'd been chatting with them. They were getting a little disillusioned with being a barista. And I said, hey, we'd love for you to apply with us for a front desk position. They were stellar. The other important piece that I think is really overlooked is the differently abled population, whether that be neurodiverse, whether it be somebody in a wheelchair. I love that the Paralympics is going right now. We can really see the capabilities that people have that are differently abled than we are, right? I hired a kid one time. I shouldn't say kid. He was young. He was 18. I'd gotten 300 applications for this job. This was many years ago. He was one of the only ones that showed up without a Starbucks cup in his hand. And he looked me in the eye and he shook my hand and he sent me a thank you note and all of that. I brought him on board because I was like, heck yeah. I realized about day 2 that he was on the spectrum. And I could tell because he was very rote in his greetings with the people that came in the door. Hi, I'm Michael. Welcome to Absolute Center. Hi, I'm Michael. Welcome to Absolute Center. It was genuine, but it was on repeat. Mm-hmm. Because that's how he'd been trained, and that's how oftentimes neurodiverse people communicate, and that's fine. I'll tell you what, that kid never called in sick. He was never late. He executed on the things that we asked him to do so deliberately. It might take him a little longer, but he was so deliberate and such a perfectionist. He was stellar. Did he understand the nuances of client communication really well? Not necessarily. But that was something that I could help him learn, or I could take on myself. It wasn't a big deal because he took the bulk of other things that I needed, like please sort out our Google Calendar. It's a disaster that I didn't expect him to have to take on in that role. So looking at those populations for the roles that they can fill, I think are important. And don't be afraid to look at differently abled people as trainers. If you look at Peloton, I can't remember the young man's name. He's one of their prime teachers and he's missing an arm, right? One of my best Pilates teachers, the person I respect, is essentially a high cervical injury or low cervical injury, pardon me. So she doesn't have full use of her arms and legs, but she can articulate how to move equipment around to a client like there's no tomorrow. So looking at those populations is important. Diving into Instagram and seeing who the people are that started working for themselves during COVID and now are secretly desiring to come back to a studio, even if it's part-time. There's a lot of them. Every time I go to a conference, a movement conference, I hear from people saying, oh, I'm so tired of teaching on Instagram or on video or in my garage. I really want to come back to a studio. They're out there. You have to make it compelling for them to want to come to work for you. Aside from Indeed, stop me if I'm going on too long.
Indeed, LinkedIn.
There's Hire My Mom. There's all sorts of kind of hidden job boards to go after. I'm happy to have you reach out to me. I've got a list of them, places where you can go searching for potential employees. A big one is veterans. The VA, local VA, you could reach out to them. Local colleges. I just reached out to a college in Central Coast here to say, hey, my client's looking for front desk people. And I reached out to the director of the exercise phys department. Within a day, I had 2 applications. And I was kind of impressed because it's a small school. If you know Santa Cruz, it's a tiny school, Cabrillo. So I was really impressed with A, he passed it on, and B, that we got responses. So she's in the interview process for that now. There's opportunity in internships, whether you look at a chiropractic school, a PT school, exercise phys department and a college, bring those people in as interns, and you can have a long-term interview process with them, and they start to learn your business. And maybe at the end of that internship, the 2 meet and they stay on board, right? So those are all the ways, some of the ways I've got. I could go on.
I'm sure you could.
What was that, 5 minutes?
I'll end it with this one last question then. It's like, just a nice piece of general advice for, HR advice for, any gym and studio owners out there, because it's a never-ending challenge, I think, for many of them out there. So if you had one nice gold nugget piece of advice, what would you give them?
Get your documentation in order. It protects you legally. And if you're in California, you need it. And some other states are following along. We have to look forward to see, not to get in a political discussion, but depending on what administration comes in, there may be more or less regulations on you as an employer. But the prevailing winds are in the favor of the employee overall. So make sure that documentation is in place. Ensure you're hiring the best person, even if you have to wait for them a little bit. Like I said earlier, always be hiring. If you have that backlog of good candidates, that last minute role that you need to fill is easier to fill. And make a compelling case for why people want to come to work for you and not the competitor down the street. Doesn't mean poach them away. It means just make yourself shine so much as an employer that you can't be overlooked when somebody's looking for a job.
I like it. Well, Katie, this has been awesome. If anybody would like to get a hold of you, if they want to get that list of all those little secret hiring hacks and hiring places, Hire My Mom, I think what you said there, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I'm happy to get a message through Instagram at FitnessHR, or if you go to fitnesshr.com, you can book in a complimentary consultation and we can have a talk. There's also some resources there. If they happen to not be linked, because I think Google is changing some things around and I don't have Michael anymore, send me an email at katie@katiesantos.com.
Perfect. Like the name is spelled right there on the screen.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Katie. Take care.
Dave, I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye, everybody.